Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of Dungeon Mastering Videos. I'm your host and resident nerd watcher, Nicholas DiVitrillo. Dungeon Mastering Videos is a new feature we're going to be offering on dungeonmastering.com, where we'll bring you all of the fine dungeon mastering content you expect from our site, reopen the discussion on some of our classic articles, and review all the latest D&D books and products. Dungeon Mastering Videos is a new feature, so we're going to be working hard to improve it in the future, but we need your feedback. After you've finished watching the video, scroll down, leave a comment, tell us what you'd like to see changed and what you would like to see in future videos, and we'll work hard to incorporate it. Today we're going to be talking about solo campaigns. Despite its misleading name, solo campaigns actually require two people. One player, playing a player character, and one dungeon master. Now, there's a lot of reasons to do solo campaigns, but the most basic one is necessity. Maybe you just don't have enough people to do a full campaign. Or maybe you have enough people, but you can't schedule a time where they can all play together. Well, it's a lot easier to schedule a time where two people can get together than six. So, solo campaigns. Of course, they're not always out of necessity. Some people favor the playstyle of solo campaigns. They tend to be lighter on combat and more heavy on role-playing, because there's only one character in the spotlight. They have less prep time for the Dungeon Master, and it's easier to improv. If you need a combat encounter, you just need to throw in one enemy or a couple minions, instead of having to work up something balanced for an entire group. Solo campaigns can sometimes be useful for teaching a new player. If they're not familiar with tabletop role-playing games, it can be intimidating to go to a table full of experts and try to learn the game on the fly. If you make them a player in a solo campaign, you can teach them one-on-one in a very safe environment where they don't have to be judged by other players and worry about holding up the game. Personally, I like solo campaigns because they show off skills that sometimes get buried in group play. If you've ever had a rogue in your game, you might notice they don't get to break into places a lot. They don't get to sneak ahead, because when they do, the rest of the group is sitting around bored. And when gamers get bored, they tend to do something stupid. So if the rogue sneaks ahead, the rest of the group gets bored and decides, we're just going to break down the door, and to heck with all this stealth stuff. Additionally, diplomacy tends to get buried in groups because 6 people, or 5 people, or however many you have, don't tend to negotiate well. There needs to be one face man to speak for the party, but again, the rest of the party gets bored in big groups. In solo campaigns, you only have one player speaking for themselves, and it tends to be a lot more diplomatic and dialogue heavy. I also like in solo campaigns that players need to use all of their skills and abilities, not just the ones they're best at. Typically, only the player with the highest heal modifier in a group needs to roll it, for example. Or, if there's a locked door, the fighter has the strength to break it down, or the rogue has the ability to pick the lock. But let's say that you are playing a cleric in a solo campaign. You don't really have the tools to go around the door. You might need to use a ritual to unlock it for you, or you might need to find another way around. You need to use your abilities more creatively in a solo campaign because you can't depend on having someone who's good at each individual thing. You just have one person and make do with what you have. If you're planning to run a solo campaign, there's some tips I can provide you to make it go a lot more smoothly. Keep it combat light. One-on-one battles or battles against groups of minions. Obviously, one player just can't handle that much power. They can't fight a full group encounter by themselves, and really, one standard enemy should be equal to one player character in a combat. That's why normally you have equal number of monsters as players. That rule still applies in solo campaigns. You may be saying to yourself, but that's lame. I don't get to put in more powerful people like beholders and dragons and witches. Well, you can still include those in your campaigns, they just won't be dealt with by fighting. If your player encounters a dragon, odds are good they're going to figure out, I can't beat this dragon on my own. They might have to use cunning, stealth, or diplomacy. You can still have foes that are larger than life and scary powerful, but they're so scary that your player knows he can't take it head on. So it can build interesting story moments where you find a way around. If you're running a solo campaign, really carefully consider the class and build you are letting your player be. Defenders and leaders are recommended in the DMG, but really you can work any class, but it's going to be more work for the Dungeon Master. You're going to have to tweak the monster hit points and damage and play around with combat a little bit. So make sure you know what you're getting into. While you can play any class, ranged builds are not a good idea. There's no defenders to keep people off you. So if you're using a ranged power, you're going to be in melee, and you're going to take opportunity attacks. And then you're going to go down. You can still play casters, but use close powers. They don't provoke attacks of opportunity, and you can get some really big explosions. One of the benefits of solo campaigns is you don't need to worry about hitting your allies. So just kaboom as much as you want. It helps to put in a sidekick in a solo campaign, so the player character has someone to talk to and bounce off of. Hirelings, familiars, and even animal companions work if you provide them with enough personality. Just remember the sidekick should not take center stage or lead the player around. The advantage of the solo campaign is the strong focus on that one PC. Don't make them secondary to their own minion. Lastly, don't be afraid to overpower. Give out extra magic items, improve the powers that the player has, even throw in some artifacts if you want. Level the characters more quickly, hand out extra feats. It's tempting to try and play by the rules. You know, they're written down for a reason. But you'd rather have your one player in a solo campaign be overpowered than underpowered. If they're underpowered, then if they get into trouble, they're done and there's no one to help them. They're overpowered, worst case scenario, they feel like a rock star of the world. They may get bored, but you can just tweak it with stronger monsters later. It's a lot easier to adjust for an overpowered character than it is to try and salvage an underpowered one getting themselves into trouble. Now, solo adventures don't have to be in a solo campaign. You can use them as a fun spotlight for characters in your regular campaigns. You're risking some overpowering and jealousy in the group if you start handing out experience and magic items in these solo adventures. So, tread carefully. One interesting thing you can do with solo adventures in a regular campaign is to do origin stories. Start the player out right before the character they have joins the group and find out how it is they got there. You're going to learn a lot of interesting background about the character and have some role-play moments that could be quite memorable. And you don't need to worry about magic items or experience points or really any jealousy in the group because you're just bringing them to where they started. Until next time, good luck and good rolling.